Hello and welcome to this week's episode of On the Couch, where we are joined by three members of the Buggy family, Martin, Ned and Gavin, to discuss their life within the GAA. Lads, thanks very much for agreeing to join us.
Thank you very much, Peter. Glad to be here.
I suppose we'll start off maybe, we'll go maybe in the order you're sitting, just your first maybe GAA memories.
My first GAA memories? Playing juvenile hurling. And I remember one day we were playing at Davistown in the county final, and Johnny Murphy, the goal bar, used to make my hurls. I was fussy about hurls, and I had 3 hurls and I broke the 3 of them, and Jim Daly had the sack with the hurls in it, and we were playing in the second half, and I cut the hurl and it was about 2 stone too heavy, and I said, I can't use that, Jim. Well, the stony one you're getting. And I missed 2 open goals. I definitely missed 2 open goals. I couldn't swing at it. That's a fact. Yeah.
That's a good opening memory.
Well, I always remember that Jim Daly with the sack. Yeah.
Very good. And yourself, Gavin?
Yeah, I won a juvenile actually in the goal. When I was 13, we played Davistown. Did you say you played Davistown as well? Yeah, we played Davistown in Belfield, and we had a very good team now. But I remember that I was quite young and I was quite maybe intimidated by the bigger fellas, and I suppose I would have been able to hurl it under 14, and they were probably stuck for a goal man, and as you probably do, they put me in the goal. My formative memories, I remember getting split on the road one day hurling. And I remember my mother was hysterical, absolutely hysterical, and and it's something that you don't see now, because most of the underage juvenile hurling probably takes place in the fields and the pitches. But we would have had a couple of little games on the road and things like that, and I got split over the eye. I can't remember where. Alan Ahern, actually, the journalist in the People paper, he would have been part of our little games growing up.
I thought you were going to say he was the culprit.
No, he wasn't the culprit. No, I probably.
You going to name that one? No.
Oh, I can't remember. It was some of the lads from down the road, and after that, I can remember playing an under-12 football final in Pearsestown, and Margaret Doyle, the former county secretary, she was the district secretary at the time, and we played Kilmore, and they had a star-studded team at the time. I remember they were very good. They had Paddy Crosby. He was on it. Scott Dorn, he was a phenomenal footballer at underage now. They had a guy called Patrick Sinnes, a couple of Bates, and a big lad in the middle of the field. Oh, he was a towering man. I think his name was John Roach. But they beat us. But I always remember that game from Pearsestown that night. And I think I remember my first kind of game with the Harriers. I wasn't allowed to play. I think my father brought me out and sneaked me on or something for under 12. I was only young and I came on. It was on. We played the Vincents in the practice, I think, in Park Harmon. Okay. So there'd be kind of a couple of standout memories that I'd have from my own younger years.
And then yourself?
Well, Laura, there's an old cliche, hurlers are born. And as far back as I can remember, there was 2 elder boys in my family, and my own father and all the Buggies. I think I was nearly able to hurl before I got out of the pram. And I remember as far back as when Martin was hurling, they were great inspiration for me. Seamus and Martin, they were great hurlers in underage in the CBS in Wexford. As far back as the early 50s, where CBS and Wexford were dominating hurling in the urban leagues that time. The Harriers were dominating juvenile and minor from the 1950s to 56. I think they won 5 minors, they won 6 juveniles. And Martin was part and parcel of a lot of those teams in the CBS. And my brother Seamus also, he may not have been as well known as a hurler at that time, but he had all the skills, and they were great inspiration for me. And sure, I had to live up to those fellas, the reputations they were building in the CBS and the Fight Harriers at that time. So they gave me the boost and the lift. And as I said, I remember we were born in the old Clonard up there, and there was a length of a road about 200 yards long, and there was 2 little cottages there, and our house where we lived. And I think there was something like 33 or 4 kids in the 3 houses. So we were never stuck for 10 or 12 boys to play hurling on the road that time. And there was no cars on the road that time. And I think anybody walking the roads at that time were in fear of their lives of the Buggys and the Cairnses and the Gainers of that time hurling on the road. And that's where I honed my skins and my skills. And I remember going to the CBS in the mid-50s, and so we didn't want anybody to coach us because we had all the craft and all the skills, and so we learned those from the elder boys of the Cairnses, the Gainers, and Martin and Seamus in particular that time. They were absolutely fantastic hurlers. And dragging it on another little bit, I remember Wexford got to 450, 52, 54, 55, 56 All-Irelands at that time. And the park was only 3/4 of a mile down the road from us, so Wexford trained there a lot that time.
Yeah.
And I was going to school in CBS. We walked into school that time, and I'd see a couple of oil lorries, and I knew the old caretaker in the park that time, a man called Nick Roach, and he would have known my father, and because he worked in one of the factories in town, and I'd be walking up home in the evenings, or maybe he'd tell my father, Wexford are training in the park, maybe of a Wednesday, or Ned Wheeler or Jim Marcy would be there in the afternoon of a Tuesday, and I'd be coming home from school and I might meet the caretaker in the park. And I often remember, unknowns to my mother and father, that I went into Wexford Park. At that age, I was only 6, 7, 8 years of age when Wexford won those All-Irelands. And I remember Nicky Racker, Ned Wheeler, Jim Marcy, Jim English, every one of them knew me by the name, because the only reason I was in there was grass that height growing on either end of the park, and there was sheep on either end. So they'd be playing maybe 6 aside, and the ball, they might only have 3 or 4 balls, and I was the man to get the balls for them fellas at that particular time. Martin might remember that. He was doing a bit of work. He was starting out working at that time, because you had to work at 14 or 15 years of age that time. I was only 7 or 8. He was probably working. So I'd be in the park every evening I could get into it.
Can you
You
remember?
pay a
much?
penny to get in,
Yeah.
in the evening, the hurl. I always remember Billy Recker used to practice. He'd come up in the afternoon, and himself and Simon Lambert, he'd have Simon Lambert running all over the place, and Recker would be practicing away. I remember that, and I'd be behind the goal, hitting the balls back to him. Sure, we had no other place.
Yeah, that was the
We
end.
fell
of
in
it.
love with Wexford Park, and that was it. That was we done all our hurling there.
And if things had conspired a different way, you could have fell in love with Markovich Park in Sligo. You were born there.
Yeah, but I don't remember much about Sligo.
That's where your family were when a couple of you were born, Mark.
Yeah, 4 of us born in Tobercorry, County Sligo, yeah. My father worked in Clore Meats of Waterford, you see, and there was a strike that was going on for a long time. And he said that the only chance he had now was to go get a job in England. So he got a job in Wals's. They had a bacon factory as well as an ice cream factory. So anyhow, he applied for, there were a new bacon factory opened up in the Connery Creamery in Sligo, and he applied for that. So he was manager there, and then he came down to Wexford in 1947, the year of the heavy snow. And he was foreman in Clore Meats at Wexford. That's how we came here. And when we lived in Clonard then for about 9 years, wasn't it? 9 or 10 years?
12 years. We came
12
to town
years.
in 1960.
And I remember going into when we got the new house in Tusker View, there were about 7 or 8 bikes on it. And all the visitors looking at us coming in, wanting, where did they go with all them bikes? Sure, we cycled every place, you know.
Yeah.
And we brought them in with us.
And Ned, your parents themselves were already fairly connected with the GA as such.
Yeah, they were great GAA people. My mother was, her maiden name, would you believe it, was Bridget Hurley, and she was born on a big high pat at the back of Welsh Park in Watford. Roan Moore Terrace was the name. And for people, it's just down the road from the I think it's the Presentation Convent there in Watford. So her she also had a nephew at that time. Waterford won 2 All-Irelands in 1948, and he captained the Waterford minor team. Tom Gallagher was his name. And she was also so proud of him, but she was a great GAA woman, as my father was a great GAA man. He was born in a little place called Ardaloo in Jenkinstown in County Kilkenny, and he was a Connacht Shamrocks man. And he actually won a junior hurling championship with Connacht in 1926, and were beaten in an intermediate final in 1930 and 32. I think that was more or less the end of his career, because he got married, I think he was around 1932, I think he was married. And as Martin said, he went to London for work. But he was a great GAA man, and there was 4 of them actually hurled on the Connacht team of that particular era. Martin, and all the names just followed on through the generations. Jack, Ned, and my father James. And he never lost his stripes as a Kilkenny man. And my father's father and Paddy Buggys' father, which would have made my father, were brothers. So he was a first cousin of Paddy Buggy, the former president of the association, who won an All-Ireland with Kilkenny in 1957. So, the onus was on us to play hurling, even though we enjoyed other sports also.
And some of the other sports that you enjoyed, Martin, would you have played many other sports in your youth as well as hurling?
No, I only played hurling and a bit of handball. And when hurling, you see, was always on of a Saturday, and handball was on of a, or Sunday, sorry, and handball was always on of a Sunday. So I had to give up the handball then. I stayed with the hurling because you couldn't do the two of them. They were always on the same day, afternoon of a Sunday. And our games were on of a Sunday, so I didn't play handball until I was bringing the boys off to. They were going to Phoenix, Arizona for the World Championships, and they were getting on to me, and I said, when you come back, I'll start. So I did. I really loved it. I enjoyed the handball and the cracking the ball alley with the boys. Tried to fake a few waces on them.
How did
How did you start out with handball then? What age did you start that at?
So we had a ball alley in Clonard, you see.
So you always played?
When we were only 5 and 6. And
yeah.
We hurled in the ball alley as well, so,
okay.
you know.
Yeah, there was an open alley in Clonard, so you'd sometimes see the open alleys dotted around the country. There's one in Kilmacree, and then there's obviously one in Cullenstown, which would be one of the more famous ones.
That's the one, for anyone who's not familiar, right down on the beach.
Right down on the beach, yeah. Trinity had one there. It was on the New Line Road, but there was a small impasse and it was knocked to the ground one evening. But there was also an open court in Clonard. And I'd say when the lads were growing up, there was many a handball game and hurling game played in the open alley. They were old courts that were built back through the mist of time for people to kind of congregate in them for dances, and then handball just was played in them as well.
There were plenty of shillings in the corner anyhow.
But there was a great tradition of handball in Clonard because of the old ball alley in it, and all the families around Clonard, the Hayeses, the Connicks, the Staffords, the Longs, and as I said, the couple of the neighbours of ours, the Cairnses and Gainers, they all traditionally met in the ball alley of a Sunday afternoon, and there was a field you'd be passing by maybe on your way home here tonight on the cross of Clonard, and some of us were so young that time we couldn't get into the ball alley, so we went up and we hurled there all day long of a Sunday. And there was many a hurler made there, and there was, as I said, there was a great tradition from all the lads around the area to play handball and hurling on the cross of Clonard. And that time, Clonard is the biggest parish in the county now. It was in Bride Street Parish at that particular time.
Yeah.
One side of the road that we were all born on, Martin and those weren't, but the younger members of my family were born in Clonard. On the left-hand side going out of up Clonard Road was in Bride Street Parish. On the other side was in Glyn Barntown Parish. And we were only 20 yards from one side of the road to the other.
So I have it on good authority, Ned, that you are or were described to me as the most natural free taker that probably has ever played the game of hurling. What would you say to that?
There's a lot of natural free takers out there, but I always felt that I was reasonably good at them, like, and I didn't practice a whole lot on them, like, but
The
Did
ball
it
was
come-
heavier though then
the
than what
ball,
it
Yeah.
like the game
Maybe
was
it came
different. The
from-
balls were heavier, but as I said, I mentioned them there previously. Nicky Rackard was the man that gave me the confidence.
To do it.
When I started playing for Wexford, as I said, he must have seen something in me, and he used to say to me, "You make sure you take the frees for your club." And he always said to me, when I was taking it 21, he said, "In for their heads and the crossbar." And that stuck in my mind for the rest of my life. And it was very few, when I took penalties, I didn't miss that many of them. I remember playing, we played a 7-a-side All-Ireland club final in Kilmacud. Ratnower after winning it 2 years in a row. And we went up, and it was a draw. So I went to penalties. And lo and behold, who was taking the last penalty was still a draw for the Harriers, only myself. And I hit the crossbar with it. And we lost the game. It was a sudden death on penalties. I don't know who had taken a few penalties before me, but Ratnower, I think they won the 3 in a row that time. But we played them a few weeks after that. There was a big tournament down in Waterford, the Waterford Glass. And we hurled them off the field. But just, you have to have a little bit of luck when you're playing these games. And sure, the county final again, Buffers Alley in 1981. The truth of the matter is, we have it on video, and Martin Casey, the priest up in Carnew, the Kerry man, hurling for Buffers Alley, will tell you that he actually put up his hurley. It was such a rasper that the ball hit the handle of his hurley, went up over the bar. And sure, it's history now. We got a 65. If justice had been done, it was a point for us. We'd have lost the game by a point. So,
And there was a very great Harrier supporter over the years. He passed away recently. There, Tom Ryan.
Tom Ryan,
But
Boogie Woogie.
he used to follow my dad everywhere. But I always remember him. It was a league game in. No, he wasn't at it now, but it was a league game in Galway. It was, and we were going to take a 21 or a penalty, and Sylvie Lalane, I think, was in the goal, and he was saying,
Put it on my chest. So I do remember that guy.
and he was there
And Tom Ryan
as
was
the
there.
only Wexford supporter probably at the venue with this, and I don't know how he got up there back in the day.
So Sylvie Lalane was no angel, because the same day, I struck the ball and stuck it into the back of the net. So I said, "That's the place to put it," Sylvie said, "not on your chest." But anyway, I was actually taking a free that day, about 60 yards out. I think I was playing with corner forward, and I was coming out to take the free. And one time I saw stars was that day, because I was coming out 50 yards to take this free, and sure, I was crouching down, bending and all. I was in shape and just putting the ball down as you do at that time. I didn't take much particular attention in placing it and making shapes. I just put the ball down and hit it. But as I was putting the ball down, I was bending down. Sylvie hit me with his hurl, his elbows, his knees. I tell you the truth, I saw stars. I don't know where the ball went. I took the free, but I hadn't a clue where it went, because I couldn't see for 2 or 3 days afterwards. I never got it back, by the way, Peter.
You just mentioned Tom Ryan there. He was
Yes.
a guy that sort of was very keen to cheer you on during games.
Yeah, he was a great fan of mine, and he lived along Roach's Terrace here, and no matter where I went in the country that time, sir, he'd turn up, and I didn't have to see him. I heard him from 200 or 300 yards away.
You would, yeah.
And sir, all the lads on the team were, giving me a bit of ribbon about it, but sure, it was an enjoyable time. He was a great fan of Wexford, he was a great fan of Harrier, and he passed away a couple of months ago. And I went down to his, he was reposing in Mackins in Wexford, and sure, the poor creature, he had nobody left him, he had no relations, and I think he was 94 years of age at the time. But I remember going down there, I said, I'd have to go down there as a mark of respect to one of my greatest fans. And I remember I opened the book there where people signed their name. And I think there was only 3 people before me had signed the book. So I think Hefo was at the funeral the next day, and as a mark of respect, and sure, there's very few people that attended his funeral, which was very, very sad. But he was a great fan of Wexford.
Great Harrier supporters
Great
now,
Harrier
over the
supporter.
years, yeah.
Yeah.
There's one other person I meant to ask you about, Ned. You've mentioned Nicky Rackard being involved in the teams and stuff like that, but another name that always crops up about training the teams was Ned Power.
Yes, he was a great St. Peter's College man. St. Peter's College were very strong in the 70s. And they probably, Martin would have heard again those fellas in the park that time. We brought them on, they brought us on. They won a couple of colleges, All Irelands. The Quigleys were there that time. Fantastic games we had. Ned Power was a great man. He was involved with all the underage teams of Wexford that time. He was a Kilkenny man, by the way, a Slieve and he was involved with the Harriers, I think, around that time, was it, Martin?
Yeah,
But he was a great man for the game, and sure, he put St. Peter's on the map, and and he put Wexford on the map underage that time too. He was a great coach, a likeable type of a man, and what a hurling man he was. He was a major loss to Wexford that time too, because he put more work in than 20 people. He probably had an input into every team too, but he was well known throughout the county and the country. But he was a major loss, in particular to St. Peter's College. I don't think they've won an All Ireland since that time either, have they?
No. He
I'm
made
not 100% sure now.
the Harriers and the college made one another. We used to hurl every Saturday.
Against each
And
other.
against St. Peter's College. Bobby Leary hurled with and Brendan Miller and Harb and Davy Raw, and the chap that used to play the handball, Ned, what do you call him, from
Remy Elwood.
Remy Elwood.
Yeah.
That was
Before we'll go in order, I suppose, of the Harrier success. And Martin, you would have been involved in the very earliest years of the Harrier success, but a lot of people wouldn't know that the Harriers won a senior football before winning the senior hurling.
well, we had a meeting, training one day. I remember I was only a chap, but Ned Wheeler was there, and Seamus Quaid, Lord of Mercy, and John Kennedy, and Hopper, and Dick Murphy. And we were a great bunch. We used to go to the pictures every Saturday evening. Paddy Cullen used to pay for it to keep us all together. And we were only 12 and 13, and we always went to the Capitol Cinema. That was our outing for the week.
Whereabouts was that in the town?
Up by the top at King Street there.
Right.
The
Coleman Doyle has
Coleman
his
Doyle's
shops in
there.
there.
Yeah, more or less opposite Kelly's pub there, just a little bit across the road.
yeah.
So that kept you together.
Paddy Cullen he was a man before his time, put it that way. He was really brilliant. And he picked the team, and we used to go to his house every Sunday morning if we were playing a match, and we thought we were he had a small sup of glucose in it, and we'd have to drink that out of a glass. And we thought we were in heaven after that. We were going to beat anybody. But he had us wired up to that, you know.
Yeah. And the time came then that the Harriers decided to enter a football team for a start anyway.
I forgot all about that. When we went to a meeting anyhow, and Paddy Cullen was saying, I think we put in a football team. So anyhow, I went to the floor, and all the lads said, yeah, we'd play, we'd love to play. So none of them had kicked the football. But the first thing you have to do now is buy a ball. So we never trained. That's no cotton now. Had to buy a football. And that's how they started playing the football.
Yeah. And success was fairly instant.
Well, sure, they didn't even practice it. We hurled up in the field.
Yeah.
Up in the rocks, up in Mulgannon. That's where we done all our hurling.
Ned, would you remember much about, as a young boy, watching those teams, those Harriers teams, like?
I never missed a game, Peter, when Martin was involved. But however he got to the game, I tagged alongside him.
That's right.
And as I said, he was one of the best hurlers in the school at that particular time, and the Harriers had great success. As I said, they won 5 or 6 minors and they won 5 juveniles in the early 50s. And Martin was a sort of a, even though he was only young at the time, he was a legend around the town in terms of going to CBS. I think he actually won 3. Was an under 13 urban. There was no Nicky record leagues that time, but there was an urban league, and I remember going on the trains to Gorey, Enniscorthy, New Ross, and as I said, there was a brother Perkins. Would I be right in saying that, Martin?
Yeah, Brother Perkins and Brother Cullen.
In Martin's time, and Brother Cullen, and they dominated. And they also dominated then with the Harriers. And then I remember going to old fields. I remember getting whoever's car or it might have been a bicycle or whatever, tractors or whatever we got on. We went to, we were in Ballyfarnog, Sars Hill, Light Water, Tom Cool, and the GA didn't cover themselves in grace that time, because you go out to the pitches, there'd be no nets, there'd be furze bushes, would I be right in saying that?
That's right.
For the lines.
Yeah.
There'd be no umpires' flags.
Rope for a crossbar.
There'd be a rope for crossbars.
Right.
And that actually happened like in the mid
Pulled
50s.
out the-
And
pulled out
like
the
I enjoyed that aspect of it that time, you know.
Yeah.
Again, and it's amazing how we've come on in leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
But the Harriers were absolutely a fantastic team that time. And as Martin said, to start playing football then, I don't know how they won the football championships,
We
but
don't
I
know
never missed
ourselves
those
either,
games.
And just to finish on the football, I suppose, and we'll move on to the hurling success then, but followed it up with 2 in a row in the football, 1959 and 1960.
Yeah.
Proving that the 59 one wasn't a fluke, I suppose, Mark.
It wasn't a fluke, no. They were fit, so fit,
Yeah.
and they were eager to go
Yeah.
and give their all. That's what the Harriers were all about. They fought for one another. We had great players, Tommy Nolan, the Lord of Mercy, and Farty, and you could name Seamus Quaid and John Kennedy. And we had good footballers now. We had one chap from Kerry, Mick Huzzy.
Who did you beat in the finals?
The Dintoners, from
Yeah.
Enniscorthy.
Yeah.
Twice.
Yeah, twice, yeah.
I think they went under a different name one of the years, I think, wasn't it? The Nimpness and St Mary's, but it was the same team under a different
St.
name.
Margaret's, was it?
I can't remember exactly
Well,
what
we had
the
to
other one
change
was.
it
Yeah.
because we weren't allowed to play football,
Yeah.
really, because we were getting players from the Sarsies, getting players from the Volunteers. So that's why Paddy Cullen changed the name to St. Margaret's.
Right, after that.
No, just for the football,
Right.
you know. We were still the Harriers,
yeah.
but St. Margaret's was the official name, I think.
And 1960 then was the year that you managed to do a double. I think St Anne's in 2000 are the only team to have done one since. You managed to win the first hurling title for the Fight Harriers, beating Aldgate in the final.
Yeah,
And you were on the team cornerback, Martin. I think.
cornerback, yeah. I wasn't expecting to be playing at all, and Paddy Cullen would call out the numbers, and a fella would hand you a jersey that you didn't know whether you were playing or not. Yeah, I was surprised I got number 2 jersey. So that's how I started playing. We had been beaten in the minor and I was awful disappointed, and Paddy Cullen, the Lord of Mercy, said, you better come up and train anyhow. So I wasn't expecting to be playing, because it was a disappointment to be. Kilmore now were very good.
Yeah.
They beat us in the juvenile in 56, and they beat us in the minor then the next year. They were very good, they had a great team. But they went off to America then to celebrate the worst thing they ever done, and there were 7 or 8 of them stayed behind, and they were brilliant hurlers. You had Paddy Myler and Fergie Duff, wasn't it?
They had a great man over him, Father Paddy
Father
MacDonald
Paddy.
came to Kilmore
That's
around
right,
that time.
yeah.
I think he was a Rathnure man.
He
Peter.
finished up with Rathnure.
I think originally he could have been from Rathnure, but he came to Kilmore around that time, and they were the next team to dominate underage after the Harriers, we say, in the late 50s.
Yeah. And what can you remember of the Harriers' first victory in 1960?
The funny thing about it, Peter, I was the mascot for the Harriers around that time, and during my time, Gavin was the mascot for our teams.
Yeah.
Like all the failures we had, Gavin would have been the mascot in my time. But I do remember nearly every year Wexford were in the All-Ireland.
Yeah.
The Harriers won, or were in the county finals. 1960, 62, 65, 68. So we had a great run that time, and we had a great innings, and sure, at that time I thought I was going to go on forever. But like, things do come to an end, and every team gets a spin at it. Like, but they were great teams. So they had Seamus Quaid, as Martin said. I often codded Martin years afterwards. They had Dick Murphy, Ned Wheeler, Martin Bergen, Bobby Leary, Sean O'Leary, another idol of mine that time, because he only lived, when we went into town, he lived around the corner from us, and he was a great friend of Martin's. But they had a fantastic team that time, and as Tommy Nolan and Sean Dowdall and his brother Con, Willie Murphy, and sure, they were a team of all-stars. But like, they were lucky. They weren't lucky, but they won 3 championships. We could have won 3 or 4 more.
And Martin, after winning the first championship in 1960, you would have entered an unofficial Leinster Championship.
No, it wasn't unofficial. It was Leinster Championship.
Yeah.
But anyhow, we had a couple of tough games against John Loxick of Cavan and Tullaroan, and they were fairly scaldy. And anyhow,
Football or hurling?
hurling. So we were playing Bennisbridge in the Leinster final. And Bennisbridge, the Harriers were winning by a point with about 7 or 8 minutes to go. And I always heard Hopper McGrath, this fella passed him by, the goalman passed him by, and the next minute he looked back and there were a fella in the goal. So then they had 16 men on the field. So Hopper shouted at the referee to count the players. So he abandoned the game, and we were awarded the championship. That was the end of the Leinster club for a few years until they brought it back in. I don't know what year they brought it back in, but it was done away with for a few years. But we were in having a cup of tea in the school in Bennisbridge, and Johnny McGovern went over to Neddy, used to hurl with Kenny. You're not going to take that on the supper, are you? Yeah, you want to take the match on it. But anyhow, we got the match.
Yeah.
And James Stevens beat the Harriers in the 1981 Leinster
point.
final by a point. And
Yeah.
I think Con Dowdall, or one of the...
Don't talk to me about it. I was looking at standing at the goal.
Yeah, but my interpretation of it, or what the story that I was told growing up, was that when he pulled on the ball, there was a huge tuft of grass by
That's
the
right.
post, that it probably wasn't cut or cultivated or whatever. And instead of, if the tuft of grass hadn't been there, the ball would have went into the goal. And James Stevens went on to win the Club All Ireland that year.
A tie.
Yeah. Yeah. And for yourself, Ned, was the first All Ireland that you won in 1966 in the minor? Would that have been the first All Ireland success you'd
That
had?
was my first All Ireland. Yeah, actually that time I was on the minor team for 3 years in a row: 64, 65, 66. The Harriers had a break from, I think we won a juvenile in 56, and there was a big break then until our team came along. We had a team. 1964, we were the first one to break through. But a couple of years before that, and when I was going to school, there was a team sort of started in CBS that time, Nafina. And they were a brilliant team. And I remember hurling against Willie Burney, Brendan Gall,
Right.
Willie Carley, Liam Bennett, Heffer, my brother-in-law, and a great teammate of mine for years afterwards. But I hurled against all of those in the early 60s, and they were dominating at underage level. I think they won a juvenile, they might have won a couple of minors. Willie Burney was captain of the Wexford minor team when they won in 1963. Yeah. And I was saying to myself around that time, like, you know, these fellas are going places. Yeah. And there was a couple of fellas in school, Jackie Pettit. There was a Murphy man that had a garage down in John Street, and they were sort of canvassing all the players and getting them for Nafina. And there was nearly a law at that time when I was going to school that if you were hurling in the CBS, you had to hurl for Nafina. And this upset the Harriers at that time. And I remember, Martin's after speaking about him, Paddy Cullen had to go on my behalf up to the Christian Brothers in the CBS to make sure that I was going to hurl for the Harriers. How could I hurl for this team in Wexford, CBS, Nafina, when my own brother was after winning a couple of senior football championships, 2 senior hurling medals, but the pressure was on us at that time.
Yeah.
When we were third, I actually hurled on the primary school team. They used to have little leagues at that time, and Brother Gleeson was the man there in my time, and Brother McHale. They were fantastic men, and I kept in touch with Brother Gleeson for years afterwards. He was transferred to Abbeyside in Waterford, and up to my 50s, maybe into my 60s, anytime I was ever going into Dungarvan, I always made sure to call in to see Brother Gleeson. He was a fantastic man for the hurling, himself and Brother McHale in the CBS at that time.
And those people, I suppose, would have helped, and there would have been others around other areas of the county, I suppose, as well, but would have helped Wexford as a county have strong underage teams in comparison with other counties.
Well, that's true, because hurling was strong in Rathnure at that time. It was developing in Owlert at that time. Buffers Alley were coming along the scene. And sure, I thought when we had won that juvenile back in 64, I think we lost the minor in 65. And the year Wexford won the All-Ireland, I think we won 66 minor. We beat Ferns in the final. And we won, I think Eddie Welch then was the captain of the minor. And Wexford had very successful underage teams in the mid-60s, mainly because they were coming out of St. Peter's College, they were coming through from Nafina, they were coming through for the Harriers in Wexford Town that time. You must remember, as I said, Willie Carley, Brendan Gall, Willie Burney. Nafina had they had 3 or 4, and there weren't Harriers on the Wexford minor team of 1963.
Yeah. So they were really a force to be reckoned with at the time, obviously.
Yeah.
You broke onto the Wexford senior panel then a couple of years later, and 68 obviously being a successful year, Ned.
I actually went up to play an under-21 trials that time in New Ross, 1967. And I remember we were playing Clare, and our trial was over. We were about to pick, I suppose, the squad for the championship, and Nicky Racker came into the dressing room, and I think the senior team was short. 3 or 4 didn't turn up on the day, or there was some reason for them not being there, and he called out 4 or 5 fellas from the under-21 squad that had been up for trials. And so I was one of the lucky ones, and I actually played that day. That was my first game for Wexford in 1967.
And what game was that? It was a league
against
game?
Clare in a league game. In New Ross it was on. So I always felt afterwards, just Nicky Record must see something in me, and it gave me a bit of confidence, it gave me a bit of a lift when he called me out of the dressing room to come into the Wexford senior squad. So mainly from that, barring I had a few bad injuries then in the early 70s, but so I played away up to the time like that. I sort of packed it in, I never retired. Only that I never retired. I didn't go out to the press with any big stories. I didn't. Well, there was no social media at that time. But I remember the last day I heard for Wexford for the Harriers was 1986 against Owlert. It was in Enniscorthy, and I went into the dressing room afterwards. I had picked up the handball at that stage, and I was very fond of it. And I used to be getting a few belts on the hands, and I just said to the lads there, "I won't be here next year, lads. I'm packing this in, But I was sort of starting out a career in the handball world then, and I think at that stage I had more or less won what I was going to win, So I enjoyed it, but I had a long career in the hurling from when I was hurling in the CBS, picking the balls up, getting the ball behind the goal for Nicky Racker and Ned Wheeler and the boys in Wexford Park, up to the time I gave up.
And then Nicky picking you to come on to the senior team.
Yeah, Nicky always picked me.
It was a bit of a...
When Nicky Racker was around, Ned Buggy was on the Wexford team. Barron, he was injured. I had a few bad injuries in the 1970s. And I was sort of on and off, and I broke my leg and I was out for 2 or 3 years. I was back for the league in 1973. I broke my ankle then again. I missed 1974. And sort of that's the way the cookie crumbles. Some fellas are luckier than others, but I felt even after coming back that time that I always had a bit of speed on my side, and I thought it had it took me that long to recover, but I wouldn't have had the same speed in the mid-70s that I probably would have had in the earlier part of my life or career.
One feature of watching back on matches and reading record books and stuff like that, they could have played you anywhere, it seems. You could be corner back one day and corner forward the next day type of thing.
Well, that's true. I remember we played. That wasn't a great help now, to see. I was a sort of probably a utility player. But I remember one day I was picked cornerback to play on Eddie Keir. And sure, the whole week I was trying to, well, how am I going to manage this, or what game plan have I got in my head? And sure, when I turned up on the day to play, I was playing wing forward. So you just imagine the preparation that you're trying to prepare for a game, and just you're trying to play the game and trying to think in your mind what's going to happen or how am I going to. And this was one of the top forwards in the country at that time. And sure, I think it was a bit ridiculous. There was no such thing that time as game plans or game tactics, or there was no people there to advise you in terms of. Sure, now they have these people. What do you call them?
Stats and all the rest of it.
Yeah, absolutely. There was not like that in my time.
Yeah.
And I'd be often picked wing back, and I'd end up corner forward. So, you just had to get on with it, but, it wouldn't have helped you, in preparing for the game, Peter.
Because you wouldn't have been so sure.
No, because, nowadays, the one thing I'd have to give is there's a lot of thought goes into the game. There's a lot of planning goes into the game. Everybody knows what's going to happen the minute you go out on the field. If all your preparation's done, you have your game and your tactics, you know what you're going to do. But that's the game it was that time. It's a completely different game now, altogether.
And just to talk a little bit about, an All-Star came along in 1979. You were the top scorer in the league and championship, I think, that year.
Yeah, sure, I suppose I felt I had to get one sometime. And it mightn't have been one of my best years, or that I felt I had performed a little bit better maybe a couple of years beforehand. But sure, I was probably knocking at the door there for a long time, and sort of probably got fed up looking at the name cropping up the whole time, so they decided to give me one. But I was delighted to get one.
Did you get a nice trip anywhere? Or
yeah,
a couple of them, maybe,
between the handball and the hurling, we travelled the world. That year now I was on the trip. We were in San Francisco, 79. But sure, we're well travelled because Martin and Seamus and Gavin and myself have been to, we were in San Diego, we were in Chicago, we've been to Edmonton in Canada, we've been to Calgary in Canada. The last time I was on a trip with Gavin was 2018. We were in Minnesota, so we were well travelled, and so we were always great mates, and we supported one another through hell and high water. And I'll also have to say that I was never attributed with winning 2 county championships, because the Harriers won in 1965, and there was an old competition that time called the Special Junior. It was for senior teams for their second teams, and it was called a Special Junior. It's done away with for years and years now. But we actually won that. I think I was 17 years of age at that time, and my brother was on the team that day. I was centre field, and Seamus, he was 3 or 4 years older than me, he was on the team. It was the only championship we ever won. But would you believe he was taking the frees that day?
And you weren't?
And no, because the seniority counted that time.
Yeah.
And sure, he scored 2-8, and he'll always boast about that to this day. As I said to him, there must have been nobody else able to take the frees. I wanted to let you take him. But he was a brilliant hurler too, and he decided then after that he'd go the handball route. And luckily enough for him, he won 3 senior All-Irelands after that in handball. And himself and Dick Ling from New Ross, Ballian Club in New Ross, I'll have to mention, they were the first Irish players representing Ireland to win a world title in 1970. So Seamus was a great hurler, very speedy, very crafty, and he probably would have made it, but sure, he decided to go the handball route.
So, Gavin, just moving on from the handball there, could you explain a little bit about the game for those of us that don't know too much about it?
Handball. Well, I suppose handball in Wexford has a long and storied tradition. You know, going back to the days of John Ryan, famous John Ryan from Bridgetown, and the Doyles from Trinity. Came along then to Dick Ling's era and Jimmy Goggins and Seamus, my uncle's era, and it would be Wexford would be one of the strongholds of handball in Ireland.
Wexford town or county?
Wexford County,
yeah.
So there will be pockets of handball around the country. Kilkenny will be a strong handball pocket. Wexford will be a very strong county. There's basically two courts. There's the old style 60 by 30, which would have been those old open courts that would have been roofed in the 60s and 70s, and that's 60 by 30. And Wexford will be very much to the forefront in promoting and kind of supporting the 60 by 30 game. And then in the maybe I think the first 40 by 20 court was built in a place called Oldcastle. I'm not sure, it could have been the 1980s. So that'd be the international game. We play that in the winter months up to maybe April, and then we swap courts. So there's 40 by 20 and 60 by 30, which kind of conform to the dimensions of the court.
Yeah.
And Wexford would have a strong history, and at the moment, currently, we would have a strong playing population.
Yeah.
Boys and girls, adults, females and males. So
what age is it played from generally?
it's played. There's championships from under 10, under 11, under 12, and there will be always juvenile championships prioritised every year. There's always county championships in both courts, and there will be leagues. There's quite a huge amount of handball activity. You know, there's courts dotted around the country, or the county. There's a new court only gone up. The official opening was last week in Davidstown. Bree has a court. There's two courts in St. Joseph's. St. Martin's have courts. Like a lot of the GAA clubs and a lot of the strong GAA clubs have courts.
Templeludigan is another.
Templeludigan, yeah. And Bridgetown have a court, and there's a court in New Rosters. Owlert has a court. Like there's loads and loads of courts. Probably the ratio of courts to any other county is probably higher in Wexford than it is anywhere in the country. And you know, there has been many fantastic players in Wexford down through the years that have kept the game going. And
would they be players maybe who would have played hurling, football, other codes of the GAA, or more specifically just handball?
I think both, you know, hurling and handball kind of are intrinsically linked. Yeah. They kind of go hand in hand. Like Liam Dunn would have won. Did Liam Dunn win a novice?
He won, I think.
All Ireland.
Liam Dunn was a great handball.
Or he either won under 21 or he won a novice All Ireland.
I think, yeah.
And well, probably the ultimate kind of handball come hurler was DJ Carey. He was a remarkable handballer as well as a remarkable hurler. At the moment, Mark Rogers, who's kind of prominent on the Clare senior hurling team, he won a minor All Ireland not so long ago. And I'd say in Wexford over the years, most guys who played handball would have hurled at one stage or the other. So I think it's just a natural progression. That you either maybe hurl, and when you're maybe think that your time is up, you go back to playing handball, or in your formative years you maybe try to balance both of them.
And in those kind of younger years, I suppose, is it played seasonally, like hurling and football?
It'll be played all year round, but this time of the year would be the 40 by 20, and it's probably more, it's easier to play 40 by 20 because the team and the field sports are not as prevalent in the winter months, so the kids get a chance to kind of go in and play, handball during the winter. Whereas when April, May comes, they're kind of out in the sunshine and in the fields, and they tend to prioritise the team sports then. But, you know, we would have a strong juvenile playing population, and it would have been strong over the last number of years. Like, we would have had, well, Jodie Keelan won, she was the first Wexford girl to win an international trial. Actually, she was in California, Pleasanton in California at Christmas. She represented Ireland. So she was the first Wexford girl to ever win an international trial. And there was two Kavanagh brothers from St. Joseph's. They won international trials in the last 10 years. Wexford will be prominent in any All-Irelands that are played at underage. Yeah. Mark Doyle from Timon, he will be an exceptionally talented handballer. So, you know, Wexford will be always to the forefront of underage handball.
Currently you're Irish, is it doubles?
Oh yeah, we won the senior doubles title with Galen Reardon from Ballyhogue in September. We beat the reigning champions in Castlebreed, so that was quite an achievement for both of us, I suppose, and maybe more so me because of my age profile. But we wouldn't have expected to win it, but we played remarkably well, and it's the senior, like, it would be the holy grail of handball, like, so we did remarkably well to win that. Yeah.
And in terms of the way that handball competitions are organised, is it similar to hurling and football that more people might be familiar with, that you win your county title and then you move on and you play for Leinster and then you move on and you play for the All-Ireland title, or are they separate competitions?
Yeah, that's the way they would have ran it in my father's time. Now in Seamus' time, you had to win your county and then you represented the county, but there was, you know, that became increasingly difficult to try to
because some counties probably weren't as competitive as others, was it? Or?
Yeah, and so they opened it up. So if there was a Wexford County Championship that would have been Seamus, Buggy, Dick Gling, Pat Murphy, some of the Quigleys, whoever back in the time, John Fleming, the winner would have come out and represented Wexford. But what they did then, GA Handball Ireland, they would have opened it up, so it was an open competition. So all of the lads in Wexford, or all of the guys in Kilkenny, could enter the competition. It veered away from the county senior champion or the county junior champion being the only person able to represent the county at that level. So, you know, it's
so in theory then, a guy who could be beaten in his own county championship could still go ahead and win the All-Ireland.
Correct.
And in terms of international then, Ireland, obviously Irish men and women compete at international level. What other countries are strong in handball?
Well, America will be strong, not as strong as what they used to be, because the 40x20 is played exclusively in America, and they would have huge complexes in all the athletic centres, like from San Francisco, San Diego, up along the coast, Portland, Oregon, Vancouver. And then in the middle, Tucson will be the home of handball in America. The Canadians play, and the Irish, and then there's they play a variation of handball which is one wall. So that is strong in New York and it's strong in continental Europe, but I don't play as much one wall as what some people play. But they tried to get that into the Olympic Games in the last number of years now, but they haven't succeeded yet. But there will be a broader spectrum of countries that play the one wall, but 40x20 will be exclusively Ireland, America, Canada. And some of the Americans would be really talented players, but the Irish have kind of dominated now in the last, say, 5-10 years, especially after Paul Brady, maybe Tony Healy. So the Irish guys that are going to the States now to play in the pro stops, they call them, or all the money tournaments, they will be the top guys at the moment.
And go on.
Yeah, whereas years ago it was, back in Duxie Walsh's time, it would have been, say, Natty Alvarado or, you know, John Byke or David Chapman. The Americans were stronger, and the Irish were kind of trying to play our own indigenous 60x30 game and then go to the States to take on the Americans. So it was more difficult for them. A lot of the younger guys now who go to the States kind of are exclusively concentrating on one of the courts.
And do they go for scholarships and things like that? Is it or Do they go out on contracts?
Yeah, well, Mark Doyle is, I mentioned him a minute ago, he's in Minnesota, Mankato University. He's on a handball scholarship now at the moment. So his game has improved like dramatically in the last year. I would have did a good bit of training with him, and I was kind of holding him off barely, but he was home at Christmas now, and I'm only chasing after his coattail. You know, but he's on a handball scholarship, and there's a couple of other Irish kids are over there as well. There was a girl from Galway, and there's a chap from Kilkenny there, and there's a girl from Tyrone. So like that's a remarkable opportunity to kind of to receive their education, and play handball as well.
Yeah, to such a high standard as well.
Yeah, but a lot of the top Irish players go to America just to compete in their tournaments. And then every 3 years there's a world championships. So
are they held here ever, or
it's there's a kind of it'll be Ireland, Canada, America. So every 3 years they alternate.
Okay.
So it's Ireland in 2024. It was disrupted through COVID. It was supposed to be in Ireland in 2021, but it's going to be next year or 2024.
And that'll be based in Croke Park.
It'll be Croke Park, in the new handball centre, yeah.
Very good.
And Ned, you would have played plenty of handball and competitively up until very recently.
Yeah, I am not playing the more competition, Peter. As I said, I didn't retire. I played the odd game, just social game. I have a friend, Mick Rossiter from Ballyhogue, and anytime I want a game, Mick is always on hand. But it's good for your mental status, and it's good for your fitness levels, and I enjoy the game now, and there's no pressure on me to play. But I did play it from, sure, when I gave up the hurling at 35 or 6, sure, I played in all. Actually, that time, when I started, unlike Seamus, when he started, he just played senior level. He didn't go through the grades. It was very hard to do what I did after coming from a hurling career, to win novice All-Irelands, junior All-Irelands, and get to senior. I had attained senior status in the 60 by 30 court and the 40 by 20 court. It must have been like my mid-40s, which took a lot of doing, because you had to be fit. It's a great game for, you have to think on your feet. You can't blame anybody else. Unlike the hurling, when I was playing with 14 other fellas, I always felt like, there's half of them are not thinking on their feet, and with all due respect to all the lads, there's a lot of thought, which is only right, goes into the game now, with all these, every team has psychologists. We never heard tell of a psychologist in our time. And in handball, you're the psychologist. You have to sort fellas out, and you have to be fit, and
very agile, of course.
You have to be agile, yeah. But it was a great sport, and I enjoyed it, and I went through all the levels. And
there are different age categories as well, aren't there?
Yeah,
over 40, over 50,
over 35, over 40, every 5 years. But there's A players like the hurling football, and B players and C players, and the A players at all levels, they're very smart, as Martin well knows. Very hard to win an A All Ireland,
Yeah.
There's over when I was in Portland and any time I go to the US Nationals, there's always an over 80s competition.
Yeah.
Over 75, there's a grade for over 75, and there's an over 80s, and there's a doctor, a general practitioner from Portland, Ed Grossenbacher is his name, and he has won the most USHA titles, and he played in the over 80, so you may get your handball goes back on, Martin, back in the alley.
Still time yet, you haven't reached that yet, Jordan. You haven't reached that category yet, Jordan. And I know we mentioned a bit about the handball in the younger days. Did you continue playing it as you got older as well, Martin, or no?
No, I was hurling. I didn't play handball until I was telling you I brought the boys to. I was bringing them off to Phoenix, Harvard, so on. And I said, when you come back, I'll start. So I did, and I enjoyed every bit of it.
And how long did you stay at it then for?
Sure.
We were beaten in the junior doubles.
That's right.
All-Ireland semi-final in Salt Hill by two brothers. They were called Kings, I think, was their name.
Yeah, that's right.
I won the junior singles in 1998, and we were beating the All Ireland semi-final junior doubles in the same year. And I would have loved to win it. You know, it would have been a great achievement to win it with my uncle. You know, but we lost. And I actually think they lost in the final now.
Yeah, the two lads from
1998. I played with Martin. Yeah.
Whose fault was it you lost?
The old man's fault.
Oh my God, I don't know. I think I had a flu.
You had the flu. You were coming back from Cheltenham. And
I was
getting sick in the car and stopping every half hour for him to get sick. So yeah, we had a good crack. We enjoyed it.
Maybe you'll make another run at it.
No, I won't. No.
We'll just go back to hurling for a moment, or actually football first. Ned, you were saying just before we started about one of your memories of playing football for Wexford, a junior football match. It was tinged with sadness.
Yeah, unfortunately, like the one and only time I ever played for Wexford was on the 11th of July 1967. I played junior football for Wexford in Mullingar against Westmeath. And on the way home, the news was breaking that a great friend of mine at the time and a great teammate of mine on the Harriers, and he was also a great Sarsfield, Martin Bergen, unfortunately had lost his life in a game in Wexford Park. I think he played with the Harriers against St. Martin's. So I'll never forget it. I rolled my eyes out the whole way home. So he was a great dual player of that time, Martin Forky Bergen. So I'll always remember the day I played the big ball game for Wexford. And
that was an accident during the game?
Yeah, it was an accident like in the game for between Fight Harriers, and it must have been, I don't think it was a championship game, I think it was a Nico Shield game at that time.
Yeah.
There was a lot of tournaments and played that time, but unlike nowadays, if you played, the championship was a knockout. So
yeah,
I go back to 1 year. Unfortunately for us, though, 1968 was it a first round losers came back?
Yeah, first time.
First round losers. That was the year Buffers Alley beat us in 1968. We had beaten the Alley in the first round, and there was a losers group that year. And sure, you know now the history, like that was the Buffers Alley's first year to win it. They beat us in 1968. We were 10 points up, and we always wonder why Willie Murphy was put off. And I often met a few of the Alley lads afterwards, and we beat them then in 1981. And we took it on the chin that day, as they took it on the chin when we lost. When they lost in 1981. But I'd often meet a few of the lads from Buffers Alley, and they'd say to me, "You stole that one on us in 1981. Well, my answer to them fellas would be, well, if we stole that one on ye in 1981, ye robbed that one us in 1968. Yeah. Because, and Martin knows, we felt like that. We left a couple of titles behind us, and we put the Alley on the road, and the Harriers it took us another 11 years to get to a final, because history will tell you, it was Ned Wheeler's last game. I don't think Hopper McGrath, Dick Murphy, Bobby O'Leary, Tommy Nolan, Sean Dowdall, I think they all sort of packed their bags at that. Yeah. And even though we were winning underage in the mid-60s, and we had, every year Wexford won in All Ireland in the mid-60s. 66, 68, the Harriers probably had 3 or 4 fellas on each team. But again, it came to 1970, James Murphy, Liam Bent, Pat Kenny Welch, Michael Brown, 4 or 5 fellas like, they didn't continue on to hurling, and they were a major loss to us, like, and that was possibly one of the reasons we didn't get to a final for so many years, because of the fact that the team broke up, and some of the younger fellas that we were expecting to come through, and sure, we were in the doldrums there for years.
You mentioned the red card for sending off for Willie Murphy in 68, but you were a victim of a strange disciplinary system in 68 as well, Ned.
Yeah, well, I always felt that I got a bit of a raw deal in the district final in the park here in 1968, which are like the past is the past. But it's a little thing that you'd never forget, because I actually had been picked on the team to play the Leinster final in 1968, and it was the only time I ever suffered a yellow card or a red card. But I've always felt I was a little bit of a victim of circumstances on the night.
Well, if the same thing happened now, you wouldn't be suspended for the inter-county match. So the disciplinary system was very different then, wasn't it? It was a bit
yeah,
stranger.
well, you were automatically suspended for a month, and sure. I possibly, like in my day, fellas reckoned that I was a nice player instead of being sort of over the top, but sure, that's the way it goes, and sure, I was a sufferer. But unfortunately for me then, I missed the next final I was in 1970 through a broken leg.
Yeah.
But that game in '68, and I heard him saying it the other day, that after he was sent off, that Nicky Rackard came to the house the following morning to go with him to see the referee, and they were going to get the referee to change his mind or to alter his report, and he possibly would have been able to play then. And sure, he'll tell you the story himself because he was there. I think his father talked him out of it.
Yeah, well, that actually happened, Peter. My father was a Kilkenny man, so we were playing Kilkenny in the Leinster final. No, he never lost his stripes, and he still would have been wanting Wexford to win, but like the advice I got from him that morning when Nicky Rackard knocked my door, came into the house, was take it on the chin, Ned. You may suffer your month suspension. And sure, I took his advice, and I told Nicky Rackard, say, I can't go against my father's wishes. And do you know something? It might have been one of the sorriest things that I ever did. But it's a story that not many people would be aware of. But so if I'm ever writing a book, I'll put it in it.
Well, you mentioned 81. It was a long time to be playing for the Harriers and not win the senior championship. I suppose Rathnewer and Buffers Alley were very strong in the 70s, and you were probably thereabouts, but just didn't get over the line until 1981 then.
Yeah, well, we probably weren't good enough, but we had 3 tremendous games against Rathnewer in 1979. We went to a third game, 2 replays. But I remember hurling with Martin, Ned Wheeler, Dick Murphy, Hopper McGrath, Sean O'Leary in the 60s. And I always remember some of them fellas saying, if we're playing a final in Enniscorthy, lads, we have to be 10 points a better team to win it. Because and we were well able to win finals in Gorey, in New Ross. We always found it hard to win in Enniscorthy. So we always felt like the St. Aidan's were the dominant team in Enniscorthy.
We got a last minute goal to win that final.
81.
81.
Yeah, that's true.
You took a 21 and
Yeah.
it went over the bar, did it?
They did, went over the... That's why, the bit of jokes I'd have with Buffers Alley saying we stole it. We did, but if the truth were known, the actual penalty that I took that day went over the bar.
And it had to be
And
retaken.
Mr. Henry Butler, a great friend of mine, by the way, he went to the umpire and he said, that's a 65. And he put up his hand for the 65. And sure, luckily enough for us, it was the last puck of the game, as I thought, 2 points behind.
The ball
just dropped into the net.
Straight from the 65.
For the one we won in 68, we got one in 81 part. So it balanced out. The Harriers team of 1981 was the most legal team, not illegal team, that ever won a championship in Wexford. There was 15 fellas hurled on that team from the town. Now I'd always rib Martin, the few teams that he won the championships, they were like the League of Nations. We had them from Cork, we had them from Galway, we had them from Laois, we had them from Marklow. But when we won our championship, fair play to them, they won it. Sure, I was delighted, I was over the moon. But every guard, every civil servant, everybody came to town in the 60s. Paddy Cullen, the Lord and Master over the Harriers, he was up after him and he signed him up for the Harriers. Fair play to Paddy, but I always get Martin. a bit of a ribbon over. We were all Wexford Town lads anyway. So,
Winners.
Yeah.
and you can't say that about every team now.
No.
Every team that wins a championship in Wexford, there's doubts about 2 or 3 of them.
But we lost a senior hurling semi-final against Ross over an illegal player. He had played with Middleton and Cork. Paddy Cullen knew, but the rest of us didn't know.
Right.
So we lost it.
It was an objection to you or something, was it?
Yeah.
Another thing in the Harriers, a little bit of history also. Gavin and myself are the only father and son in the 5 Harriers that have won county senior titles.
Right.
Of all the titles they won, there's not a father and son up there. And like it's nice to have that. Like, it's nice to be a
very nice memory.
and there wouldn't be many people aware of it, you know. So it's nice to have it in the family.
And Gavin, it was 20 years later then that the Harriers managed to win their 5th and to date most recent championship, and you were on the team.
Yeah, 2001 we beat the Rapparees in the final, 13 points to 9. So yeah, I would have always felt over the years that, you know, my team and maybe teams before us we carried the weight of the 81 team. It was, and every year that went by, it was another year, and the last team in the club to win it was 81, and we always felt that little bit of pressure. And we had lost finals in 84, 85, 91. I was the sub goalie actually in 91, but we also lost 2 finals. Well, and ironically, the 3 of them were to Buffers Alley, 84, 85. One of them was a replay, and we lost again in 91 to Buffers Alley. And we knocked on the door for a few years then. We were beaten in 2 semi-final replays. Owler beat us in 1. That was definitely a replay. It was 2 semi-final replays.
There was a smash and grab effort in 1997 from Owler that the man who's videoing this particular interview tonight was actually videoing the match of, and the last minute or 2 was on YouTube, I think.
Oh, I saw it there recently. Yeah, I was kind of looking at it like that. I thought to myself, we might be going to win this one.
They got 1-1 in the last 30 seconds or something to
Yeah,
draw, bring it to the replay.
Yeah, Paul Finn got a goal from the 21. I think there could have been 13 Harriers lads on the line, and it went in, and there was a passage of play then after it, and I think Larry had a chance to clear it down the field, and the ball broke out, and Martin Story put it over the bar, and we lost the replay then. And in 2001, I suppose we had knocked on the door for a few years previously, and we probably had a team good enough to win it. Look, you know, we had Larry and we had John Harrington, Lord of mercy on him, and we had a couple of younger lads came through, Rory Mall and Nicky Lambert. You know, we did have a good team, and I suppose, you know, that was our time, and I don't think we did anything differently that year than we did any other year, but I think we probably just got the rub of the green, and things fell into place for us. But and I suppose in the history of the Harriers, we don't seem to win championships as a rule. You know, if you look back, how had the titles we won 2001, and then before that was 81, and then you had to go back to the 60s, yeah. So we haven't, for the town's team and the kind of passion for hurling that's in the town, we probably have been major underachievers. And you know, it's 2001, it's 2023 now, and we haven't won it since 2001, which is quite concerning as the years tick by.
If you were to look ahead to the future, Ned, I was very impressed with a lot of the Harriers, the younger guys coming along, and maybe there is a potential in the next few years to be competing right back up there again.
Yeah, well, I certainly hope so, Peter. You know, there's a lot of young talent there at the moment, and I hope they maintain their desire, like I see 2 or 3 of them on the county senior pan there at the minute, sure. That'll do them a world of good and bring them on, but it's not easy when senior titles, and, you know, I think the country clubs have a lot more going from, their smaller areas. There's more community spirit attached to the country clubs than there is to the town clubs, you know. And Lee Chin is a fantastic player there, and hopefully he has another couple of years left, but you can't win a county championship depending on one man, you know. So there's a lot of them going to have to step up to the plate now and see how good they are, but it won't be easy. But so we'll be rooting from the whole way, but the Harriers badly need a senior title at the moment. Like, they have a fine big clubhouse out there, and things seem to be going well for them. But it's up to the fellas themselves. As a group, they'll just have to realise now, lads. We've only a couple of years left, 3 or 4 years, where we can win this thing, and don't leave any stone unturned now. And I hope they're not one of the favourites to win it this year, but it's certainly not going to be. It's not going to be softer. It's not going to be handed it to them.
It's a very open championship in recent years, with all the different teams winning it. I suppose Ferns this year, and we had the Shelmaliers and Gorey in recent years as well. Martin, would you still enjoy going to the games?
I do, yeah. I don't go to that many. I play a bit of golf every Sunday, you see, they're often stand up Sunday. I'm after getting awful fond of the golf.
Yeah.
But I do go to some of them,
Yeah. I forgot to ask you about your badminton days, Ned.
Yeah, I played all sorts of games, Peter, and I was into badminton in St. Joseph's in Father Sinnott's club there years ago, and I really liked the badminton. But sure, when the hurling, I actually won a junior when I was 18 years of age. I beat a guy called Jimmy Brady from Enniscorthy. And my next year then, it must have been 1967, 68. I was only 19, 20 at the time. And I went up, I got to the senior final, and I played in Gorey. And there was loads of Kinchleys, McDonald's. There was a couple of players up there, Nash's, Dean Nash, Dennis Nash. And one of them was an international player at the time. And so here was I coming from a junior badminton player, and I went up to Gorey and I beat Dean Nash in the final. I don't know whether hopefully he's still alive, but it was a sort of a kick in the pants for him up, and the badminton club was on the way up to the Gaelic Park. And the following year then I went up, I continued playing, and I beat a guy from New Ross. John Flynn was his name. There was Cassans and Flynn's played in New Ross that time, and he was a big player in the province that time, and I beat him. But sure, I had to pack it in because I was playing soccer and football and running across country, and getting on in the hurling world then. And sure,
there's only so much you can do, I suppose.
There's only so much you can do. You have to make a decision. It's the very same as young fellas now playing soccer, hurling, football, rugby. There's a time come, maybe in their early 20s, they'll just have to decide to go on one way or the other, Especially nowadays, there's so much demands on them now. They can't play everything.
Well, as we said, there's only so much you can do, but there's also only so long you can talk for.
I talked enough anyway, Peter.
I'm sure we could probably spend another hour or two here, but for the length of time that we have been here, I've certainly found you very interesting, the three of you, to listen to about the days that you had and the days that you'll still have ahead, I suppose, and different challenges ahead in life. And
I've learned lots about handball.
Yeah.
I'm happy.
So plenty learned.
You might take it up yourself.
You never know.
So yeah, that's a good point, I suppose. I'm sure the handball around, Gavin, is the final word. I suppose a lot of people, there are plenty of clubs around, and to encourage people to get involved.
Pardon?
And to encourage people to get involved.
Oh yeah, sure. It's a great game all year round, but it's a great game in the winter when the mainstream GA sports are kind of slightly on the back burner. You can play recreationally, you can play competitively. Boys and girls can play. There's loads of very well organised championships. If you don't want to enter the championships, you can go down, and it'd be good for your fitness. And there's loads of mothers and others Gaelic football, and I'm sure there's loads of mothers and others handball as well. If you get into the clubs and organise a way there, and the courts are all accessible, and away you go, you get your goggles or you get your glasses. You don't need a huge amount of gear, and you can play away there. And it's a great game for kids to kind of improve their footwork, their ambidexterity, and indirectly then that'll be an enormous benefit to them, when they go back to their hurling and football clubs.
Coordination and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, and every year the Coming to Munsko is always on. It used to be run by Colin O'Tierney from Ferns. He did a remarkable job, and then Eamon Codd runs it at the moment, and you see the youngsters, the boys and girls, in their formative primary school years, and they get great enjoyment when they play the primary schools handball competition. It's great joy to watch them now, and they all have a great
the
cut
next
at the
generation.
handball, yeah.
Before we go there, Peter, I'd like to give a shout out to a friend of mine, an old former hurling teammate of mine, Johnny Murphy from Crossabeg. Johnny went through a bad patch of health there for a long time, and I hope to meet up with him soon and have a good old chat, but I'd like to wish him the best of luck, and I hope he has a good speedy recovery.
And we'd extend those wishes to Johnny, and we'd like to thank Martin, Ned and Gavin for their time here and very interesting discussion. And if you're looking for a new hobby, consider handball. On the Couch is sponsored by Murphy's Furniture, who've been supporters of Wexford GAA for many years. Murphy's have 2 shops in Wexford, one in Gorey and one in Wexford Town. Along with a huge range of furniture, sofas, beds and mattresses, Murphy's are now launching their carpet and flooring ranges across their 5 shops this December. They also have stores in Carlow, Naas and Dublin. Anthony and Nikki Murphy are proud supporters of Wexford GAA and are delighted to now offer flooring to the people of Wexford